This is an intervention, a chance to sit down with friends around the campfire, chat about experiences, and discuss how scouting has made us who we are.
To explore the challenges volunteers face, answering questions and running a section and much more. Together we are learning from other people's experiences and bright new ideas. Welcome to the Scouters Anonymous podcast. On today's podcast we are joined remotely by James, a scout volunteer from Hampshire. Welcome to the Scouters Anonymous podcast, James. Could you please explain your current roles and your past roles?
Yeah, thanks for having me on. So my current scout role is a scout team member, and I'm a scout team leader in training. And then previous roles was explorer sectional assistant under U2, and then a scout section assistant at another troop.
Have you got a particular sort of favourite role? Obviously, the different roles are working with different age ranges and have different challenges, I would say. I certainly have my favourite, but we just sort of want to know what your opinion is. And
Yeah, well, I've only ever done scouts and explorers, so only ever really been doing cubs and beavers on camps and things like that. So it's most of my leadering has been as a scout leader, so it's got to be scouts.
does your current group, does it have a squirrel section? Because I'm quite interested. We don't have one at my group.
No. So this is something I've noticed having come from a city-based group, especially with the scouts, where when I was with you guys and doing scouts as well, that troop had 30 kids over two groups, so 60 in total. Where I'm now in a small Hampshire village, we've got all the kids in the village and that amounts to 20. So we've got like a real shortage of young people as well as leaders. So I think across three sections, there's only 10 leaders. So we haven't quite got the leadership pool to run a squirrel section. It's definitely on the plan to try and sort one, but we just don't have enough people to run one.
I think it's quite similar sort of across the country, but certainly sort of Michael's gone from a very city-based scout group to a more rural group. Definitely in terms of activities, I think a lot of groups across the country are facing quite big waiting lists for young people. I think scouting is bigger than it's probably ever been before, but there is a massive sort of deficit in volunteers. A lot of groups actually, it's a lot of families I find that are holding groups afloat, unfortunately. And as good as that is, it's also good to have volunteers from different backgrounds, different age ranges, just to bring in different skill sets, which I think is really difficult, especially with sort of looking at starting new sections up like squirrels. From my role as a group lead volunteer, we're definitely interested in opening a squirrels dray, but again, as you say, it's the volunteers, and I certainly don't want to be down there because they scare me a little bit at that age range.
That is a similar thing to us though, because we've got the waiting list for beavers. We just don't have we don't really have the facilities either. Being in a village, we don't have two or three areas to meet. It's in the school hall or the village hall, and we're sort of fighting with a drama club, the Girl Guides, and model making. It's very difficult to try and find an area to actually meet as well.
But I mean, if you've already got a waiting list for beavers, then it should be quite easy to open a school drive when you have got the leaders, because the people are already there.
Providing you've got everyone, yeah.
I mean, we're finding we've got people on the waiting list for beavers at the age of sort of 1, 2, just because it's in demand so much.
So in demand.
We've actually got such a large waiting list that we could have 2 or 3 beaver colonies. We have the space to be able to do it because we have our own Scout HQ, but obviously we don't have the volunteers, unfortunately, and it's a massive strain already on the group of volunteers we've got. Whereas obviously at your group, Michael, it's very different. You've got a lot more sections.
A lot more sections, yeah. I think we've still got a shortage of leaders, really, but I think a lot of leaders in our
How many leaders have you got in each section then, like on an average?
There is probably still only 3, 4 maybe. But then we have quite a lot of young leaders in the group, so most of my explorers are young leaders as well. So there'll be at least like
I suppose,
section. So yeah,
that helps.
Yeah,
it's part of that mindset as well as you bring in the young people through, particularly the explorer section, and then eventually, obviously, into network, which is a whole different conversation. Just trying to build that sort of background around them getting the skills to become a leader or a young leader, because in my Explorer unit, we only actually have one young leader, whereas in your Explorer unit, Michael, virtually all of them are young leaders, and it's a very different mindset in your group compared to ours.
I became the leader through the Young Leader program. I sort of just rocked up one day for DOV and then never left.
I think that's a good way that like Duke of Edinburgh and your King Scout Award intertwines quite well. And yeah, okay, sort of obviously for your bronze, you're only there for 3 months as a young leader, but one of our young people that's doing their bronze has actually finished their volunteering. And he's like, actually, I want to stay. I quite enjoy it. They're working with the beaver colony. And from what they're saying, they're enjoying the unique challenges of working with people that age, but they're actually getting quite a lot out of it. And it's quite a nice refresh from what they were saying, from sort of having to study for exams and stuff at the moment. But yeah, I think all three of us, being a young leader, all at the same group. Obviously, we've all sort of gone our separate ways since then. So I think moving on to the next thing, sort of still introducing yourself, we would like to ask you what your favourite memory in scouting is. So this could be as a young person in any of the sections that you went through, or since you've been an adult volunteer, or it could be two different stories, one from each.
So, favourite memory, I was quite fortunate enough that when I was a scout, the troop that I was with as a scout, we were able to go to Disney on an international trip. That was quite a fun few days that we did. And then as a leader, again, it's always having a good laugh. I know when the three of us were in the Explorers, we were always having a good laugh. But there was an incident with a pedalo and a leader. Whenever asked, what's your favourite memory, that always springs to mind. We're on like an out of bounds style international break on the south of France, and you do water sports, so like kayaking and stand-up paddleboard and all of that. And all week there were pedalos on the side of the lake. So kids keep asking, can we get a pedalo? Can we get a pedalo? Can we get a pedalo? And the leaders were like, right, final day, we'll hire one or two. And they've got a slide on them. So they all pedal out and are doing their thing, and they get the leaders going down the slides. So one of the leaders climbs up and gets stuck at the top, and all the kids decide to then jump ship, and the pedalo rolls over.
I mean, I was never on that international. I think Michael was, but
Yeah,
it certainly became folklore with that group of explorers particularly.
it became the sort of thing of like, do you know when you have campfire stories and you're never sure if they're true or not? It became one of them.
Yes.
It's one of my biggest regrets in scouting that I was not at that trip. However, we did obviously have a very good recreation on our turkey and tinsel camp, where the young people had to make a video, I think, about scouting memories, and it was a very good recreation.
It's quite funny as well, actually, because I was clearing my phone out the other day and I stumbled upon said video. But yeah, that international trip was actually my first experience of being a true leader. I think I turned 18, and 2 weeks later we all jumped on a coach and headed to the south of France, which was quite weird because I'd gone from being an explorer to being a leader almost overnight, and was now supposed to be a responsible adult.
How did you find that transition? Because obviously you know the young people very well that you're now suddenly in charge of.
Yeah.
And you've had to go from having quite a friendly, matey sort of relationship with them to still being quite laid back and friendly with them, but you've got to be able to sort of switch and be quite serious at times.
Yeah. So I think the switching to be serious at times, I think I could do quite well. I think the bits that I struggled with then were during activities. So it was like if you were playing a game, because I'd only just become a leader, it was like, oh, I'll take part then. And then they were like, well, no, you've got to sort of take a step back and sort of limit how much you join in now. And that was what I sort of initially really struggled with, being like, oh, I'm not actually allowed to do this anymore.
I think that's why it's quite good being around sort of experienced leaders at the same time, so they can
Oh yeah,
help
the
guide
leadership
you.
team is also very experienced.
Obviously you're sensible enough to know the do's and don'ts, but obviously having experienced leaders around you to just sort of guide you in the right direction of actually it's okay to join in with this, or actually sort of observe from a distance rather than
Yeah,
getting involved in this.
yeah, and it was also quite a big insight actually onto how camps and overnight stays are run. Because obviously, being a scout and an explorer, you're just told to go here and do this. You're not actually privy to any of the sort of ins and outs of it actually, and that was quite an interesting thing to learn.
It's a very sheltered life, I think, as a young person, and then
Oh,
especially
yeah,
if you get thrown straight in as a leader into being involved in camps and larger activities, it's quite a thrown in at the deep end
very,
situation.
very much a baptism of fire. Yeah,
Yeah.
talking about the international, it's just like joggled another memory. Michael will know this as well about the incident with a mouse
Yes.
in the leader's mess and
So
the
leader screaming.
monumental effort that went into trying to get out a very small wood mouse that was more afraid of 10 leaders than the leaders were of it.
I remember one leader standing on a stool with a broom and screaming like a little girl.
It's the
Yeah.
moment when you question who the young people are and who the adults
Well,
are.
it was we made a barricade with 4 leaders, and the mouse has left the door, and all 4 leaders have then promptly dropped the barricade and legged it. You go, well, why have we done this?
Never look,
Just escape.
never look at that person the same way ever again.
No.
You mentioned being a young leader and then being an adult leader quite quickly, and you went on the international camp within 2 weeks of being a leader. I think between the three of us, we had an average age of 19 roughly as a leadership team when we first took on the Explorers. What do you think were the benefits and challenges of being a young leadership team?
But I think a benefit was that we all got on really well, sort of being similar ages. We all formed quite a friendship, which then acted as a downside as well because we were always there in like a friendship capacity rather than a sort of professional leaders environment.
I also think because we had only just left Explorers, we still had the mindset of being an explorer, so I think that helped
Yeah.
with relating to them and being able to put on a program that we would enjoy and therefore they would. So I think that helped as well.
I think that helped us, but I think we also probably didn't get the respect from the young people or as much respect from them had we been older. I
Yeah.
think because we were quite a young leadership team, they knew sort of how to work around us.
I mean, we were also developing our leadership styles, I would say, which obviously, after a few years, we're quite set in how we do things. The kids understand how we sort of lead, so it's a lot more stable environment for them. Obviously, at the time when we took over, although we knew each other quite well as friends, we were still working out how each other works in different scenarios when we were running activities. There was a lot of times where we needed support off more experienced leaders, which I think we had sort of mixed experiences with. Obviously, there was some people that were put in place that we didn't necessarily get the support off that we were hoping, and then there was other people that we could lean upon. So our former explorer leaders that we'd taken over from, although they were having a break from scouting, they were a very good sort of sounding barrier to talk about different issues and get their views on. And then there was other leaders in other sections that helped us out if we were a leader short one night, or if we just needed a different view as to how to deal with certain situations. So I think that was a little bit of a downfall on our part, being quite a young leadership team. But something I was discussing with a family member the other day is, I think especially in an explorer section, it's actually quite helpful being quite young, because obviously, I know it's quite the cheesy line to use, scouting is a movement, we move with times, and obviously we're well over 100 years old as an organisation, and social expectations and sort of where we are as a country and worldwide has changed a lot. and especially in the Explorer section with the age ranges we're working with, it's very, very present as
They're
to
almost
what's
they're
going on
almost
in the
two
world.
extremes, aren't they? Yeah.
So it's quite helpful having a younger leadership team that perhaps understands some of the changes socially and can support the young people a lot more.
But I think, like you said, where we were figuring out our leadership styles, the way I run the scout troop that I'm at now takes after being part of the Explorer team with you and Michael. And even now, the times have changed from even when we were learning our trade. So it's even different now. So you're constantly learning. But I think the past experiences I can now lean on has helped.
I think as well, it'd be quite interesting to get your view. Obviously, you're more heavily involved, I would say, in the scout section compared to when you were in
Yeah.
sort of scouts initially in Birmingham when you were a lot younger. Obviously, having to work with different ages, you have to adapt your leadership style, and scouts is that age where actually the young people are still quite immature or don't have sort of the same life experiences as the explorers do. However, it is quite pertinent that we are building up sort of the respect for the young people and the trust that we give them in some of the activities, but also balancing the fact that they are still quite young.
Yeah, I think the difference with the scouts and explorers is the scouts that I'm with now, because of the age bracket, they're still quite not dependent as such, but like they're still quite easy to entertain and keep focused because sort of like they come to scouts and it's we're now at scouts, whereas by the time they get to explorers, they've got other things that are going on in their life that impact what they're like when they get there, sort of bring everything with them. Whereas scouts, it's by the time they get through the door, there's very little that then impacts their behaviour when they're at scouts.
Yeah, been quite a big thing when I moved up north with Explorers in Birmingham. We've never really had to deal with relationship stuff necessarily. But now in my current unit, a lot of them are dating within the unit and outside the unit. But that's been a new challenge as well because every time there's been a breakup or even sorting out groups for things or tent allocations, it can make a lot of things more complicated. It's been a good challenge. It also makes them closer as a unit because they're a lot more intertwined with each other.
I think it's definitely a unique challenge. Obviously, not one that I specifically deal with in my Explorer unit because it's not sort of they don't have the same sort of relationships with each other as in Michael's unit. We have had it a little bit, but not to the same extent. And I think it's a fine balance of making sure everything's appropriate, and obviously with their age range, and actually there's quite a lot of support when you read up on and guidance of how to deal with things from sort of Scout HQ and Gilwell, as well as just chatting to other Explorer leaders as to how they've dealt with things in the past. I think that's quite a big thing. Again, obviously we're quite experienced, I would say, as Scout leaders for the average sort of length of time that people are volunteering for in Scouts.
How young we were when we
still
started.
need that support.
Yeah, I mean, we started off young. So, I mean, we've been doing it for, 7 years, maybe? Roughly each?
But if you encapsulate my entire time as leader in title, I went straight into being a young leader when I left Scouts. So I became a young leader at 15. So I've been doing this for 10 years.
Yeah.
Granted, I've not had the responsibility of being a group Scout team leader before. So learning that now is quite interesting and a nice new challenge. But being part of that team for 10 years has all built up to me doing it now. And sort of going back to your point on relationships, it's something I didn't notice in Birmingham is where it's so sort of spread. People travel for a scout troop in Birmingham. Where I'm now in a small village in Hampshire, it is you've only got that village. By the time they get to the older age of scouts, you're already starting to see behavioural sort of changes. So it's like they're already starting to get to that point of relationships are on their mind rather than focusing on the activities that we've given them. Just going to say they age out then before it sort of becomes a problem for us as a leader.
It does create challenges a lot. I mean, it's usually whenever there's a breakup, it creates challenges. It's not always relationships, it could be friendships as well. There's been a lot of issues with friendships as well, especially if, say, you're going on a camp, say, where they're sharing a tent with a certain friend, and then a week before the camp, they're not friends anymore, and they have to move it around again. So there are definitely
I know,
challenges.
yeah, I've had sort of first-hand experiences with that when I was in Scouts and Explorers. It's a very different view when you're a leader to when you're actually an explorer.
Some of the things we've had to deal with my sort of new leadership team since yourself and Michael have moved away from the unit is quite a lot of issues from outside actually being brought into scouting, and actually you have to be quite diverse in your understanding of their issues and how you can support them, because obviously we want to be able to support them so they can develop a lot more, but we also don't want it to start impacting scouts. But I think with my explorers, they're actually quite mature now compared to previous cohorts of explorers, so they're quite good in actually just turning up, getting on with what they want to do. And actually at that age, they're coming to explorers because they want to be there, whereas I think some of the younger sections, they probably enjoy their time at Scouts or at Cubs or whatever, but they're coming more because their parents are bringing them, whereas Explorers, because actually they're getting quite a bit out of Scouts. Even if they come and we're not doing an activity and we're just chilling, having a chat, or some nights when we've literally put bring your revision for your exams with you and do it in a different scenario, and we'll just have a bit of background music and whatnot on.
But I think that sort of wanting to be there, there's a real sort of like bell curve with that, and it sort of peaks at Scouts, because I've noticed over the last 2 terms, especially the leadership team I'm in now, we have been constantly sort of sending messages home saying, is this really what the young person wants? And I have a very young scout group now. Like, the oldest young person is only just turning 12, which in a scout troop is very young. So it's like the entire troop is under the age of 12. Being a very young scout troop as well, you'd think it'd be quite boisterous, but it's surprisingly easy to manage your behaviour. We had more problems with the older scouts than we did with the younger scouts.
As they get older, they try and prove themselves almost to each other, don't they? So
Yeah,
usually challenges where they're trying to act up.
As they push the boundaries. Something I've had problems with my troop is where we're a small village, everybody knows everyone. So it's if you're out in doing a wide game in the park or even in the playground, if you've got somebody that walks past, the chances are at least one of the scouts knows them, in which case then they get chatting, they start to muck around, and you're like, well, it's a very difficult situation to try and manage here because one of you isn't a scout, or one of them isn't a scout and one is. How do you approach that as a leader to try and separate them and get the scout back on task?
This amazing podcast is sponsored by Wallywear Clothing. Looking to make your scout group stand out? At Wallywear Clothing, we bring creativity to life with personalised clothing, accessories and custom branding. Whether you already have a group logo or need a completely bespoke design, we can help create something unique that your scouts will wear with pride. From hoodies and t-shirts to accessories and branded merchandise, we make designs that help your group feel united, professional and unforgettable. And it's not just scouts, we also work with businesses to create high quality branded clothing and promotional items that leave a lasting impression. Find us on Instagram at wallywear.clothing and let's bring your vision to life. Terms and conditions apply. Looking amazing in Wallywear apparel is not guaranteed but highly probable. Side effects may include increased campfire confidence, excessive branding envy, and other scout groups asking where you got your cool hoodies. Wallywear accepts no responsibility for sudden popularity, legendary jamboree status, or leaders requesting merch at every event. Failure to look cool on camp may result in your tent being repossessed, your marshmallows being redistributed, and first refusal of the good camping spots being revoked. Bespoke designs may cause uncontrollable smiling, dramatic neckerchief flicking, and spontaneous chants of "this is brilliant." Please Wallywear responsibly. Yeah, so the next point that we really wanted to speak about was obviously your own experiences with sort of your personal life moving away from Birmingham. So you weren't sort of actively involved in scouting, you still kept in contact with ourselves and a few other people that were still in scouts, and kept the provisions there for you to come and help on camps and stuff when you just to sort of stay involved with Scouts. But we wanted to sort of see what it was like having that break from Scouting, and then actually what it was like coming back in a completely different county, and how the two counties sort of are similar and very different, because obviously it's very different areas.
Oh, yeah.
And obviously there's been quite a lot of changes recently in Scouting, so how that was just to come back into that, and you probably couldn't necessarily pick up where you left off. It was actually adapting to and learning again almost.
I think my break from scouting was very sudden. Was at the end of term I left, and it was literally just like term ends, right, I'm done. I moved for work, and I moved obviously down to the south coast. And I think when I first moved out, it was like, right, I need to look for a scout group. And then obviously because we were such a young leadership team and the support from the former leaders and leaders from other groups, it developed quite a sort of close-knit relationship with them, sort of like quite a good friendship, which is why we're still friends now. We're still doing scouting things together, even though Michael's up north, Ollie, you're in. That's also why it sort of took me quite a while to get back into the swing of it. So it was like I'd look for a group and I'd be like, but it's not going to be the same, is it? Having
I was going to say that because
personally,
our group, obviously, when sort of all of us were involved, were very close knit. And I think, again, it's the same sort of thing with Michael, but obviously he didn't have that break. He'd already arranged a new group to come into. But I suppose it can be quite a challenge, and actually quite scary, to be honest, coming into this new group. And they're probably quite close knit as well. And I know from talking to other people in our district in different groups, actually our group, sort of from an outside perspective, were quite closed off, and it felt like we weren't very open to other people coming in. Obviously we're very welcoming, but it can be quite scary, especially getting new volunteers that have never been in scouting before. We sort of have to be quite conscious of how we come across to other people.
I think that's why it was like I would look at another group and I go, but because I personally had such a good time being a leader in Birmingham, I was like, I don't think it's going to be the same, is it? And then when I finally got to a position where I'm like, right, I'm in the area of the country I'm going to stay. I think I was out of it for 2.5, nearly 3 years. Didn't realise actually how much I'd missed being in the scouting movement until I started in this current troop. And it's almost like riding a bike. You sort of go back into the troop, and yes, it's a new troop and a new environment, but it's like, right, I'm here, we crack on. And I came in like an absolute wrecking ball.
I would expect nothing less. What was it like once you managed to find a group? Did you struggle to find a group close to where you were, or was it quite natural that you just got in touch with them? And then what was the process like getting back involved and going through that process again?
So getting back into the swing of it was like where I've been a scout and an explorer in the two troops that I was leaders for. I'd never been through that process of joining as a leader. I'd just sort of been promoted in those troops. I'd gone onto the website and been like, where's the closest troop to where I live? And it was like, right, enter your postcode, goes, how far do you want to travel? What nights do you want to meet? And it came up with, obviously every village by me has a scout group. I think there was 4 scout groups all within a 15-20 minute drive of where I live. So it was like, right, which one was the closest? This one. Emailed my district. They were like, look, this is the situation with 3 groups. There's one group which is the closest, but doesn't have a need for leaders. They're quite well established. There's this group which would really benefit from having you. It's 25-minute drive away. Or there's this local group which are looking for leaders. It's a 10-minute drive from you, but obviously if you want to go somewhere else, it's like no foul. So I was like, well, it's close. They want a leader. I'll give it a shot. They put me in touch with the group lead volunteer, who also just so happens to be the scout team lead for the scout troop. We exchanged a few emails about the troop and what I'm looking for. We then met, had a face-to-face sort of informal chat meeting sort of thing. He was like, right, this is the day we meet. This is our first meeting. Come along. And sort of I went in, and like I said, it was like riding a bike. that first meeting back, I was like, I don't realise how much I'd missed being a leader. I think I've been there now for a year and a half, 2 years. Over the last 12 months, the group lead volunteer has sort of said, being a scout team lead and group lead, bit much, as I'm sure you found it when you were doing it. And he was like, I would like to take a few nights off of scouts. Are you happy to run? Sort of thing. And I found myself actually going back to when we were leaders and running it as a sort of, there's no clear leader, but there is a sort of hand on the tiller. So I try to include everybody, but I'm the final say.
I think that's sort of how I run in my group, certainly, because obviously you're explaining about your group lead volunteer and how he was also doing the role of the scout team lead. In my circumstance, it's doing the explorer team lead role as well. I mean, I would jump at the opportunity if somebody come in and said, look, I've got 100 years experience, maybe not that many years, but I've got plenty of experience and actually I can help and I can take over running the explorer section. Obviously, in reality, that's probably not ever going to happen, but we've got quite a good leadership team within explorers that actually we sort of share out the responsibilities. So depending on what activity we're doing, we have a different leader for each night. And with work and everything, we're quite flexible, so I'm not able to be there a third of the time. I'm not there, but again, as you said, the book stops with me, so if there is any issues, that's sort of me to deal with. But I trust my leadership team, and they're really good at dealing with other stuff that's going on and running activities, so I sort of definitely get the view of your group lead volunteer. I also understand your view of actually, in your own words, the hand on the tiller sort of thing, to pardon the pun, coming from a Sea Scout and all that. So that leads us nicely on to the next sort of topic that I wanted to lead us down. Obviously, when you were in Birmingham, you were part of two different groups. So just for the listeners, your Explorer unit was part of a Sea Scout group, and your Scout troop, that was part of a Land Scout group. Your new group, since you come back into Scouting, that's also a Land Scout group, a regular group.
Yep.
What are some of the experiences you would say that you've brought over from specifically sort of the Sea Scouting side into the Land Scout side and vice versa, I would say?
So obviously, Sea Scouts in Birmingham, you're not doing much sailing on the sea. We were all at a reservoir. Coming from a regular landlocked unit, having the ability to do water sport within the summer term. I was going to say whenever we wanted, but like within the summer term, I didn't realize how much of a not easy term it is, but like how straightforward to plan it was. But also being on the water meant the young people enjoy themselves a lot more. Being on the south coast, we're closer to the Solent than Birmingham is. So actually, although we're just a regular land-based scout unit, I found it's actually easier to organise water-based sport than it was in Birmingham. So for a scout troop, although the two troops are on paper exactly the same, the scout troop I'm at the moment, we're doing a lot more sort of out of bounds style activities than when I was back in Birmingham.
How did you find as a leader, specifically in the Sea Scouting bit, because the group you were involved with was a Royal Navy recognised Sea Scout group, as it was called then. Now it's Royal Navy affiliated group. How did you find it around the knowledge sort of thing? Because a lot of the leadership team you were involved with, I believe, had came up through that Sea Scout group, whereas yourself, I think all your younger sections, you'd been through a Land Scout group and then moved to Sea Scouting for Explorers.
So when I moved to Explorers, it was, I think the whole sort of activities and things were very similar. I think as a movement, everything we do in the movement is very similar. But the Sea Scout part came in with the colours at the start. So at flag break, Sea Scouts do it very differently to sort of like a regular scout troop. Regular scouts, you have one person who breaks the flag because it's folded up very nicely and suspended from whatever you can get your hands on. So in the school hall, we use a piece of equipment, whereas Sea Scouts have a full ceremony that involves a party of 3. It's got a special bell and a whistle, and leaders actually have to do some voice commands.
A bosun's pipe, and you do a bosun's call, and you also
Yes.
use the bell, and obviously
Yep.
hoist the flag rather than break it.
Well, I mean, that's the opposite of what I do now. Obviously, before I took more of a laid-back role. Usually Ollie did a lot of the talking bit, and I sort of did more of the hands-on stuff, I'd say. Whereas now, obviously, moving up north, having my own leadership team, I've had to take on a lot more responsibility with talking and briefing people. Although one of my other leaders has now started doing a lot more of that as well. So, yeah, but it's been an interesting challenge for myself as well with learning how to do all that.
How have you found that? Because obviously, when you were part of a leadership team with myself and obviously James in the early part, I would say our leadership styles sort of worked quite well with each other. Obviously, when we were dealing with stuff, I would do sort of more of the talking and the leading from the front, with yourself and James supporting from the background. But obviously, you've had to jump into sort of what I was doing, and the other leaders around you are now doing probably what you used to do a bit more.
Yeah, I mean, I've tried to build a team that has the same sort of mindset, which I think I've found.
Do you think you're using our leadership style as a reference? Because I know I find myself looking at the 3 of us, thinking I can make something similar.
Yeah,
Do you
I
find
think
that?
so.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that's what I'm sort of aiming to build, but I think it's difference of age as well. So one of my leaders is similar in age, whereas the other one's a bit older. So I think that difference is noticeable sometimes. But I do find that I'm trying to build a team that's very similar to how we've always ran things, which I think is how it works in Explorers from my experience. I think if you're too hands-on with them, a lot of Explorers would just switch off. You sort of need to give them a bit of freedom, a bit of leeway. Obviously, still keeping it safe and
Thinking.
yeah. But allowing them to just go off and try things within that safe environment, I think works really well with Explorers.
It's quite interesting because obviously the way that we parted as a team of 3 initially was obviously James left quite suddenly at the end of a term, and then yourself, Michael, when you moved, we knew a bit more in advance, and we'd brought other leaders in to support the unit. But I would say when you both left, I struggled quite a bit because my leadership style was obviously it's quite a unique
It sort of
leadership
complemented.
style.
It complemented us, didn't it? It was
Yeah,
complementary of us
and then
being
I
there.
got new leaders that have very different leadership styles. Still very good leaders, but it didn't complement sort of the way I worked quite a bit. And again, age ranges. So we initially, when you guys had left, I was still left with a team of 3, but it was another person that was quite young. He's, I think, 3 years older than myself, but was very, very new to scouting, had only sort of been involved with us for probably less than a year. And then I had another leader that's got a lot more experience, but not necessarily in the Explorer section. Their sort of former section used to be Scouts, which is, again, quite a bit more hands-on from what obviously Michael was saying with Explorers. It's a lot of the time taking a step back and seeing, sort of letting them make their own sort of journey. But I think from talking to them quite personally, they've struggled quite a bit actually adapting to a new way of having to lead, because they've never been part of Explorers before, and actually having to ask questions of the other leaders. Actually, how do I deal with this situation? Because I don't want to go in sort of all gung-ho like I probably would with some of the other sections. And equally, I find myself doing that when I'm supporting as a group lead, going into other sections that I haven't got any experience in, or with scouts that I haven't been involved with for a number of years. Actually, I need to be a bit more switched on with some of the sections because I can't be as laid back as I am in Explorers.
So I think that's where it's sort of helped me, where I've not gone from Explorers to Scouts as such, because I was already a Scout leader. I've sort of managed to jump almost just straight back into the role that I was already in.
Yeah, because
And
you already
the
had
Scout
the
troop I was
experiences of
at,
both sections, which I think
yeah,
has probably helped you
yeah.
quite a
So
bit.
I had, yeah, because the way you two ran the Explorer troop was very different to the leadership of the Scout troop. So the Scout troop was sort of very established. Everyone knew their roles. So when a new leader came in, I think when I left the scout group, I was one of 6 or 7 leaders on one night. So it was like, I when I left, it was like it almost didn't matter to the group. They just sort of carried on as normal. Whereas with explorers, it was when I left, I was like, that's going to impact you two quite a lot because it was just the 3 of us. Whereas I left my scout troop and I was like, they'll be fine because they've got a consistent supply of young leaders who know the deal because they've seen all of us in that position already. So when I started in this scout troop, it was like just pick up from where I left off, just with a smaller team and no young leaders, which we now have 1 of or 2 of.
I suppose a question I just thought of, both yourself, James, and Michael, is having moved on from the original group that you were both involved in, do you find yourself still going back to get advice from past leaders or just to generally chat or offload to, I suppose, friends now as you've moved on, but some of the leaders that you were involved with at the time, and also getting different views? Because I find quite often it's helpful to get an outside picture from sort of somebody that's not actively involved in sort of the decision making of that group, and it helps sort of see a wider picture of what's going on.
Well, I think
Yeah,
it comes down to the sort of dynamic of the leadership team. So it's like I don't talk to anybody from the scout troop I was part of anymore. I was never as close to them as what it was like at Explorers with you two.
I think personally because of how much we went through, just me and I with all the politics within
Yeah.
the group as well, we sort of formed a friendship that was quite, let's say, trusting. Or
Well, I think it was where the 3 of us were part of Explorers, but you two were sort of joint team leaders. You interacted with like the committee and everyone like that more than I ever did.
I think us two having the extra trauma that we went through, I think
Experience.
it brought us a lot closer together. So yeah, I think, and yeah, it does help to have an outside perspective of things. As much as you might not know my young people, it's sometimes good to give a scenario. You not necessarily know who it's about, but you'd still be able to give an opinion on how you would deal with it, and then that would help me form my decision.
It's quite good as well because I'm loosely involved with your Explorer unit. I was going on a jamboree with yourselves and supporting the unit and the district wider up here. Obviously, I know sort of the kids and I've been on camps with them, and it's, I would say, from my point of view, without being too big-headed, it's quite helpful on camps when I'm there because I know the kids know me a little bit, but because I'm a outside leader, if there's any issues, it helps to deal with them a lot more, I would say, because I can deal with it and then they don't have an issue with Michael the following week when they're going to Explorers.
Yeah.
It's good to sort of have that separation as well.
It's true though, isn't it? Because it's like you two have the same experiences that I'm now finding out myself in my current position. So in the next couple of months to a year, you might find me asking for advice on stuff because I know that you two have done it already and we're still in contact with each other.
The last topic that I sort of thought of on the fly as we were talking through, I'm not sure whether Michael is aware of sort of the conversations myself and you have had, James. I just wanted to briefly cover sort of the challenges that we face as Scout volunteers with some of the preconceptions that we face, I think, off members of the public, both just generally when you're having a conversation with someone and you mention that you were a volunteer in scouting and sort of your history around that, and also when you're out and about as we try and promote in scouting and you are having to interact with members of the public. I know I've recently had a challenge when we were doing a hiking activity around the local roads. Not that there's many places to hike in Birmingham, but we were sort of out and about and the young people set off in different groups and we go around in a support car just checking up on their welfare, and we sat there waiting for sort of the last group of explorers to come through, and there was a lady that was quite challenging as to and questioning as to why we were sat there in a car, and just felt it was very odd. We obviously got out and was very professional with her. We had our neckerchiefs on and our name badges and stuff that identify who we're sort of a part of, and we explained the activity that was going on and the reason why we were sat there, and we were waiting for the young people to go past the checkpoint that we were sat at just to check that they were okay and check in with them. And we struggled with it a little bit. Yeah, so obviously we spoke to her in quite a professional manner, explained what was going on. We were waiting for the young people to come past the checkpoint so we could check on their well-being and just check that they were okay and heading in the right direction. And she was quite challenging and didn't believe what we were going on, questioning sort of whether it was legal or anything. She obviously didn't quite understand the nature of the activity that we were doing. And she actually confronted the young people as they were coming past. And actually, they dealt with it in a very, very sensible and mature way. And they explained obviously what was going on, and they knew ourselves. But I think it just highlights some of the challenges with the members of the public not necessarily understanding what we do as scouts, and also, as I say, having these preconceptions of scout leaders. Don't know whether either of you have had similar situations.
I have fairly recently. I say that it's within the last 12 months. Obviously, where you're explorers and I'm scouts, you are allowed to sort of release your young people out as long as you're there to support in a car. Scouts, we have to be present with them. So 9 times out of 10, my interactions with the members of the public are out and about in the village or at fundraising events, that sort of thing. So always very nice, very lovely. But there's the odd time where I think we were doing a night hike from one village to another, and we've come through public footpath that runs through his land, and he's come out shouting, very agitated, very confronting to the scouts about torches scaring wildlife and how we shouldn't have torches on a night hike. And being scouts with leaders present, obviously leaders have sort of stepped in and said, look, mate, you shouldn't approach a group of young people like that because you've come in and you're quite threatening. Also, we're scouts, we've written the risk assessment, we know what we're doing with them. You can't then come in and say, ignore your leaders, they don't know what they're doing, these are the rules. And he's then also sort of confronted us on the path we've taken. But it was like, oh, this is a part-time footpath. You're here because I allow you to. And I'm sat there with an ordnance survey map that says it's public right of way. That's probably the most challenging encounter I've ever had with a member of the public. And it's looking back at it now, I probably didn't handle it the best way. I definitely could have handled it better. I also am quite proud in the fact that I didn't lose it in front of the scouts.
The other differences with Scouts Explorers is obviously you're with the scouts, so you can deal with that. Whereas a lot of the time you're reliant on your explorers explaining themselves almost. So you're expecting them to represent scouting in a good way for you. So I think that's part of the training with the explorers. You know, when you set them off for like D&V, you explain to them that they're there on behalf of scouting and they need to make a good impression to the public. I don't think I've not really had the same situation moving north. I think, especially in current district, it's a lot bigger than scouting ever was in Birmingham. I think Ollie's probably experienced that when he's come up. Especially like in my group alone, we've got 2 of each section. We did have 3 scout sections, so it's quite a big group. The district's quite big. It's got quite a big presence in the area.
I think geography-wise as well, your district is about the same size as the county of Birmingham. Yeah. Obviously, group-wise, it's a different number of groups as to in Birmingham, because I think Birmingham's the largest county by group and population, but obviously scouting's very, very different in a very dense city like that compared to up here.
Have you got a lot of scout groups local to you, though? Or are you like the only scout group for a fair old distance?
No, there's quite a few in the area.
Because that's sort of like the opposite to what I've got down south, is that we did have a relatively small district, but they've just redrawn our district, so we've now got a slightly bigger district, but every group is relatively small because every village has its own scout troop. So there's loads of scout troops that are very small and compact. So where I'm at now, we've only got 1 cub, 1 scout, 1 beaver, and they're not massive groups. They're only probably 25, 30 kids in each.
I mean, you used to have what, 3 groups in the town that your group's in, but obviously it's some of the groups have closed due to not having enough volunteers.
Yeah, I mean, there's always a volunteer issue, no matter how big the area is.
I think you
Yeah.
get volunteer issues all over the country, don't you?
Yeah, that's always going to be an issue.
What I've found as well, I think where I am in Birmingham, the groups and the districts seem to be a lot more, not necessarily isolated, but they do their own thing a lot more than they do up in sort of Michael's district. However, I would say in Birmingham, the county is probably a little bit more involved. There's a lot more contact from the county lead volunteer and the county leadership team, whereas I don't think you sort of get that as much up here. Is that sort of similar for you, James?
So I've got more of a connection to district than I do to county, because Hampshire is relatively big county-wise. County's almost like Gilwell to us. They're very sort of off radar. If you want anything, it's always go to district first. You don't go to county. And it's, like I said, where we were quite a tight, small district, everyone in the district knows most people. And then obviously we've then expanded with the redraw of the line, and we've acquired new groups into that district. So it feels like a new district, even though it's not.
I mean, I think up here, obviously, I think Ollie, you've only seen Explorers, which has got quite a big programme, and everyone's sort of involved with each other. Although I don't know if the lower sections are the same, district event-wise, from what I've heard. It helps that the group lead for my group also runs all the Explorer stuff. He used to be the Explorer lead. Not sure what his official role is currently, but he still does all the Explorer events. So that obviously helps with being out in the area locally, because everyone sort of knows him, because he also runs a local business. So a lot of people know him in the area. But also, because the events are quite good in the districts, a lot of the groups, a lot of the units know each other. Like, I know most of the Explorer leaders in the area. I'm not sure about Scouts, but yeah, it's a lot more involved in terms of Explorers. It's a lot bigger than when I was in Birmingham, which is one of the good things I found when I moved up north. There was just a lot more going on, and the young people seemed a lot more involved as well. So whereas in Birmingham you might get like 50% attendance maybe with a unit, I've found that I've almost got 100% attendance pretty much all year, except from like exam period obviously, but pretty much 100% attendance every week, which is quite good.
I know, like you said, they're getting out and about in the community and getting your face, like people recognise you. That's something I've noticed being in a smaller area. So obviously being in Birmingham, you can go out onto the high street and people would be like, who are you? What are you doing? And you're like, we're scouts from the bottom of the high street, like 150 metres away from you. Being in a village now, it's you walk outside and everyone's like, hey, how you doing? How's this doing? How's it going? Can we do anything for you? It's like the local pub, the scouts have a sort of almost yearly pub quiz that we help with because we know the owners of the pub so well.
Which will probably make it easier, like program work, won't it? Because you'll be able to.
It makes it a
visit
lot
of
easier
stuff,
program wise, and it also makes it a lot easier to do sort of fundraising and charity work.
Yeah.
Because we're so well known, the second you approach anyone, you almost don't need to explain yourself. They're just like, we're in, we're going to help.
Yeah.
What can we do for you? Which is something I feel like I never got in Birmingham. I think in Birmingham, if you wanted to get something organised, you almost had to explain everything in so much detail before anyone would sort of be like, yeah.
Thank you, James, for coming on the podcast. It's been very eye-opening to discuss some of your experiences, both with ourselves in our leadership team and actually sort of what's going on now in your scouting life and some of the challenges you might experience in the future.
Yeah, thank you for having me.